Corruption has plagued South Africa for decades. It's a story as old as our democracy, a persistent shadow that looms over the promise of the Rainbow Nation. It's the punchline to a joke that nobody finds funny anymore, because the cost is measured in more than just money. It's measured in lost opportunities, broken trust, and a generation's fading hope. We see the headlines, we hear the whispers, but sometimes the sheer scale of it, the audacity, can feel overwhelming, almost abstract. But it's not abstract. It has names, faces, and specific price tags attached to the betrayal of public trust. Today we're not just whispering, we're pulling back the curtain to put those names and faces front and center. We're going to count down the top 10 ministers whose scandals didn't just make headlines, they shook the very foundations of our country. These aren't just stories of greed, they are chronicles of how power can be systematically abused, how institutions can be hollowed out from the inside, and how the people who are meant to serve the public end up serving only themselves. This is more than a list, it's a testament to the challenges we face. So buckle up. This isn't going to be an easy ride, and it might make you angry. It should. We're not here to just point fingers. We're here to understand the mechanics of the machine that has held our country captive for so long. We need to see the rot clearly before we can even begin to think about cutting it out. This is a journey into the heart of the matter, a look at the individuals who turned public office into a personal enrichment scheme. Let's dive into the dark side of politics. Alright, let's start at the very top, or rather, the man who was at the very top. Number 10, Jacob Zuma. Now, calling Zuma's presidency a scandal is like calling the ocean a bit wet. It's a massive understatement. His time in office wasn't just marred by corruption, it was defined by it. It was the era that gave us the term state capture, a phrase so chillingly accurate it sounds like something from a spy thriller. But for South Africa, it was the daily news. This wasn't just a few bad apples. This was the systematic repurposing of the state to serve private interests. The story, of course, is inseparable from the Gupta family. Three brothers who arrived in South Africa and, through their close relationship with Zuma and his family, allegedly managed to influence cabinet appointments, steer state contracts, and essentially run a shadow government from their Saxonwold compound. Remember when one minister said the Guptas offered him the top job in finance before the president did? You can't make this stuff up. It was a level of audacity that left the nation speechless. The state, our state, was seemingly up for sale, and the highest bidders were getting prime cabinet seats. And then there was Nkandla. Oh, Nkandla, the infamous fire pool, a swimming pool justified as a firefighting resource, built with millions of rands of taxpayer money at his private home. It became the symbol of the era, the blatant misuse of public funds for personal luxury, defended with the most ridiculous excuses imaginable. The Public Protector's report, Secure in Comfort, laid it all bare, yet the denials and deflections continued for years. It was a masterclass in political evasion, a long, drawn-out drama that tested the limits of our constitutional democracy. The Zondo Commission of Inquiry into State Capture later spent years untangling this complex web. Witness after witness came forward with jaw-dropping testimony, painting a picture of a presidency that enabled looting on an industrial scale. From Eskom to Transnet to SAA, our state-owned enterprises were allegedly bled dry, their coffers emptied to enrich a select few. The cost wasn't just financial, it was the erosion of public institutions, the crippling of our economy, and the deep, deep betrayal of the liberation struggle's ideals. Jacob Zuma's legacy is a cautionary tale. It shows how a charismatic leader, once a hero of the struggle, can preside over a system that hollows out the very democracy he fought to build. The legal battles continue to this day, a long, slow grind towards accountability. But the damage, the deep scar on the nation's psyche, will take generations to heal. He isn't just a former president, he is a symbol of an entire era of decay. Coming in at number 9, we have a man whose name became synonymous with provincial power plays and controversy long before he hit the national stage, Ace Magashule. As the premier of the Free State, he ran the province like his own personal fiefdom. If Jacob Zuma was the national architect of state capture, Magashule was the master of its provincial franchise. He was a political puppeteer, pulling strings, and allegedly ensuring that the province's resources flowed in very specific, very questionable directions. His flagship scandal, the one that finally brought him to the national courts, is the 255 million Rand Free State Asbestos audit. Think about that for a second. R250 million. For what? To identify and remove dangerous asbestos from the homes of the province's poorest residents. It was a project that should have been about public health and safety. Instead, it allegedly became a get-rich-quick scheme. The work was never properly done, but the money? Oh, the money disappeared. Investigators allege a complex web of shell companies and kickbacks, a classic corruption playbook. A joint venture was awarded the tender, despite having no expertise in asbestos removal. The money was then allegedly funneled through a series of subcontractors, with huge sums kicked back to powerful political figures. It was a scheme that was as cynical as it was greedy, profiting from a public health crisis while leaving vulnerable people exposed to dangerous materials. It's the kind of story that makes your blood boil. But the asbestos deal was just one chapter in a long book. There were also the allegations surrounding his time as premier, his close ties to the Guptas, and his alleged role in directing provincial government contracts to favored companies. The #Gupta leaks emails implicated him, suggesting he was a key facilitator for the family's interest in the Free State. He was the gatekeeper, the man you had to go through if you wanted a piece of the pie in his province. And the Guptas, it seems, knew exactly who to call. As ANC Secretary General, he projected an image of untouchable power, a political gangster as some would call him. He fought tooth and nail against his suspension from the party, a dramatic political showdown that exposed the deep factions within the ANC. Ace Magashule's story is a stark reminder that corruption isn't just a national phenomenon. It festers in the provinces, far from the media glare of Johannesburg and Cape Town, hollowing out local government and robbing ordinary people of the services they desperately need. At number 8, we have a man who seemed to be everywhere during the height of the state capture era, Malusi Gigaba. With his sharp suits and smooth talk, he was the face of a new generation of ANC leaders. But behind the designer glasses and confident demeanor, a very different story was unfolding. He held key positions: Minister of Public Enterprises, Minister of Home Affairs, Minister of Finance, and at each stop, his tenure was dogged by allegations of facilitating the Gupta family's agenda. His time at Public Enterprises was particularly crucial. This is the ministry that oversees our giant state-owned companies like Eskom and Transnet. It was here that the Guptas allegedly began their systematic takeover. Appointments to the boards of these companies were critical, and Gigaba was the man with the power to make them. The Zondo Commission heard testimony alleging that he was a key enabler, appointing Gupta-friendly individuals who would then approve dodgy contracts and deals worth billions. He wasn't just a bystander, he was allegedly the gatekeeper who handed over the keys. Then came his stint as Minister of Home Affairs, which brought a whole new level of scandal. This is where the infamous Gupta naturalization saga happened. Members of the Gupta family and their associates were granted South African citizenship with incredible, almost magical speed. While ordinary people wait years battling bureaucracy and red tape, the Guptas allegedly received the red carpet treatment. Gigaba has always denied any wrongdoing, claiming he acted on official advice. But the speed and irregularity of the process raised serious questions about whether rules were bent for the well-connected. The Gupta leaks, a massive trove of incriminating emails, painted an even more damning picture. They suggested a cozy relationship, with the family having influence over his appointments, his speeches, and even his travel arrangements. He became the poster boy for what critics called a captured minister, someone whose loyalty was not to the South African public, but to his powerful patrons. The evidence presented at the Zondo Commission was extensive, detailing a pattern of behavior that pointed directly towards enabling state capture. Malusi Gigaba's story is a tragic one in many ways, a leader with immense potential, who instead became entangled in the biggest political scandal in our democratic history. His career is a lesson in how proximity to unchecked power and influence can corrupt. Whether as the man who appointed the boards, the man who granted the citizenships, or the man who eventually held the country's purse strings as finance minister, his fingerprints seem to be all over the state capture crime scene. Our 7th entry is a minister whose actions threaten the livelihoods of the most vulnerable people in our society. I'm talking about Bathabile Dlamini and the SASA grants crisis. As Minister of Social Development, her one and only job was to ensure that millions of poor South Africans, pensioners, people with disabilities and children received their social grants on time. It is the state's most direct and vital lifeline. Yet under her leadership, this entire system was brought to the brink of collapse. The crisis began when the Constitutional Court ruled that the contract with the existing service provider, Cash Paymaster Services or CPS, was invalid. The court gave SASA, under Dlamini's leadership, years to find a new legal solution and to take the payment system in-house. It was a clear instruction from the highest court in the land, but what happened? Nothing. For years, deadlines were missed, warnings were ignored, and no viable alternative was put in place. It was a spectacular failure of management and leadership. As the deadline for the end of the invalid contract loomed, panic set in. It looked like 17 million people might not get their grants. The country held its breath. At the 11th hour, in a move that shocked everyone, Dlamini went back to the Constitutional Court, begging to be allowed to extend the illegal contract with CPS, the very company the court had ordered them to replace. It was an admission of complete and utter failure, creating a self-made crisis that put millions of lives at risk. The court was furious, and rightly so. They slammed her for her incompetence and her misleading testimony. She was later found to have lied under oath to the court about the extent of the crisis and her role in it, a finding that led to a perjury charge. This wasn't just about being bad at your job. This was about actively misleading the judiciary and the public while gambling with the well-being of the poor. It was a breathtaking display of arrogance and ineptitude. Critics argue this was never just about incompetence. Some believe the manufactured crisis was a way to ensure the lucrative contract remained with CPS, a company with its own questionable links. Regardless of the motive, the outcome was the same: immense stress and uncertainty for millions, and a deep stain on the department meant to be the ultimate safety net. Bathabile Dlamini's legacy is one of a minister who took the most sacred of public trusts, caring for the vulnerable, and treated it with shocking recklessness. At number 6, we have a man who went from being a provincial mech to the Minister of Mineral Resources, and his name is Mosebenzi Zwane. His story is inextricably linked to one of the most heartbreaking and infuriating state capture projects of them all, the Vrede Dairy Project. This was a project that was supposed to empower emerging black farmers in the Free State. It was sold as a story of transformation and hope. In reality, it became a personal cash cow for the Gupta family. The idea was simple. The Free State government would partner with a company called Estina to establish a massive dairy farm that would benefit the local community. Over 200 million rand of public money was poured into the project. But the beneficiaries, the 80 poor farmers who were promised a stake, received nothing. Not a single cow, not a single cent. The project was a complete sham, designed from the ground up to siphon money from the state. Where did the money go? Investigations, most notably by Bongani, traced it through a complex web of accounts straight to the Guptas. The funds were allegedly laundered and used for, among other things, paying for the lavish multi-million rand Gupta wedding at Sun City. Let that sink in. Money meant to lift people out of poverty in the Free State was allegedly used to fund one of the most extravagant parties the country has ever seen. The symbolism is just sickening. Mosebenzi Zwane, as the MEC for Agriculture in the Free State at the time, was central to this scheme. He championed the project, he allegedly fast-tracked the payments, and he flew to India with the Guptas. His involvement was so deep that when he was later inexplicably appointed Minister of Mineral Resources by Jacob Zuma, many saw it as a reward for his loyalty. As minister, he continued to court controversy, including trying to help the Guptas purchase a coal mine that supplied Eskom. The Vrede Dairy scandal is perhaps the most visceral example of state capture's human cost. It wasn't just about abstract billions being stolen from a state-owned company. It was about taking food out of the mouths of the poor. It was the theft of a dream from a community that had been promised a better life. Mosebenzi Zwane's role in this affair makes him a key figure in our countdown, a politician whose actions represent a profound betrayal of the very people he was meant to serve. Breaking into our top 5 is a minister known for her powerful presence and fierce loyalty, Nomvula Mokonyane. Affectionately known as Mama Action, her career has been a whirlwind of high-profile cabinet positions. But beneath the surface of Action, the Zondo Commission uncovered a torrent of allegations linking her to the corrupt facilities management company, Bosasa, now known as African Global Operations. The testimony painted a picture not of public service, but of personal enrichment funded by a company that thrived on corrupt state tenders. The allegations are straight out of a gangster movie. We heard testimony from former Bosasa COO, Angelo Agrizzi, who claimed the company kept Mokonyane on a retainer, paying her 50,000 rand in cash every single month for years. This wasn't for services rendered, it was allegedly for her political influence, to keep the doors open for Bosasa to secure lucrative government contracts. Agrizi's testimony was explosive, detailing how cash was allegedly delivered in gray security bags, a steady stream of bribes to maintain a powerful ally, but it didn't stop with cash. The commission heard that Bosasa allegedly paid for everything. From her 40th birthday party to Christmas groceries year after year, we're talking cases of expensive whiskey and Bribe meat, to security upgrades at her home, including CCTV and electric fencing. The list was endless. It was, as Agrizi described it, a relationship of total capture, where a private company allegedly took care of a minister's every need in exchange for political protection and access to state business. Mokonyane has vehemently denied all these allegations, dismissing Agrizi as a disgruntled, racist employee. She has maintained her innocence throughout, but the sheer volume and detail of the testimony at the Zondo Commission were staggering. It created a powerful narrative of a minister living a life subsidized by a corrupt enterprise. The story of Bosasa is the story of how deep the rot went, how a single company could allegedly buy influence across multiple government departments for decades. Nomvula Mokonyane's case highlights the insidious nature of this kind of corruption. It's not just about a single dodgy tender, it's about a long-term systemic relationship of patronage. It's about how private interests can infiltrate the state at the highest levels, turning public servants into private assets. Mama Action became a symbol of this system, a politician whose alleged actions were not for the people but for her benefactors at Bosasa. At number 4 we have Faith Muthambi, a minister whose tenure at the Ministry of Communications is, honestly, a case study in how to dismantle a public institution. Her primary target? The South African Broadcasting Corporation, the SABC. The public broadcaster is a cornerstone of our democracy, meant to be an independent source of news and information for all South Africans. But under Muthambi's watch, it allegedly became a state propaganda machine and a piggy bank for the politically connected. Her relationship with the infamous SABC COO, Hlaudi Motsoeneng, was central to the broadcaster's decline. Motsoeneng, a man without a matrix certificate, ran the SABC with an iron fist, purging journalists who dared to be critical, banning the broadcast of violent protests and introducing a bizarre 90% local music quota that, honestly, crippled the broadcaster's finances. Muthambi, instead of holding him accountable, was his biggest cheerleader. She defended him, protected him, and allegedly gave him the political cover he needed to wreak havoc. But her role went deeper than just enabling Hlaudi. The Gupta leaks revealed shocking allegations about her own conduct. Leaked emails showed her sharing confidential cabinet documents and policy information directly with the Gupta family. Think about that for a second. A sitting cabinet minister, sworn to secrecy, allegedly emailing the minutes of cabinet meetings, the highest decision-making body in the country, to a private family. It was an unprecedented breach of national security and her oath of office. This alleged sharing of information gave the Guptas an inside track, allowing them to anticipate government policy and position their businesses accordingly. It was really the ultimate betrayal of public trust. She was also accused of interfering in the SABC's board appointments, ensuring that compliant individuals were put in place who wouldn't challenge her or Hlaudi's authority. She effectively captured the institution from the top down, turning it into a fiefdom that served her interests and those of her powerful friends. The parliamentary inquiry into the SABC board laid bare the chaos and corruption. Witness after witness spoke of a climate of fear, political interference, and financial mismanagement. Faith Muthambi's legacy is the near-total collapse of a vital public institution. Her story is a chilling example of how a single minister, allegedly in cahoots with powerful private interests, can undermine the very fabric of our democracy by silencing the public's voice. Our number 3 spot goes to the late Tina Joemat-Pettersson, a minister whose career was, honestly, a long series of controversies, culminating in one of the most bizarre and costly scandals in recent memory, the Strategic Oil Reserve sale. As Minister of Energy, she was the custodian of South Africa's emergency fuel stockpile. This is oil that is kept by law for a national crisis. It's not something you just sell off on a whim. Yet, that is exactly what happened on her watch. In late 2015, with no public announcement, she secretly approved the sale of 10 million barrels of South Africa's strategic crude oil reserves. The oil was sold at a rock-bottom price of around $28 a barrel, right at the lowest point of a global oil price slump. The country lost an estimated 5 billion rand in the deal. It was a fire sale of a critical national asset, conducted in the shadows. When the news finally broke, the explanation given was that it wasn't a sale, but a stock rotation. Nobody bought it. A stock rotation implies you sell old stock and buy new stock. But no new stock was bought, the reserves were simply gone. A public protector report later found the sale to be illegal and improper, and that Joemat-Pettersson had been reckless in her handling of the matter. It was a decision that made absolutely no economic or strategic sense for the country, but it made a handful of private companies very, very rich. This wasn't her first brush with scandal. As Minister of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries, she was embroiled in a controversy over the awarding of an 800 million rand tender to manage the state's fishery patrol vessels. The tender was awarded irregularly, and the public protector found her guilty of maladministration and improper conduct, saying she had wasted taxpayer money. It was a pattern of behavior that seemed to follow her from one ministry to the next. The story of Tina Joemat-Pettersson is a story of questionable decisions that consistently cost the taxpayer billions while benefiting private interests. The sale of the strategic oil reserves remains one of the most audacious acts of mismanagement in our history. It left the country vulnerable and significantly poorer, all under a veil of secrecy. It's a stark reminder of how critical national assets can be disposed of with shocking ease when oversight fails and accountability is absent. Coming in at a very strong number 2 is a man who shot to notoriety with, well, breathtaking speed. Bongani Bongo. His time as Minister of State Security was short, but it was incredibly eventful, and not in a good way. He is perhaps the clearest example of a politician allegedly appointed specifically to disrupt and derail accountability. His main scandal revolves around a brazen attempt to bribe a senior parliamentary official. The allegation is this. While a parliamentary inquiry was investigating corruption and capture at Eskom Bongo, then the Minister of State Security, allegedly approached the evidence leader of that inquiry. He didn't come to offer information. He came allegedly with a blank check to bribe the official to stop the inquiry. He is accused of asking the advocate to name his price to feign sickness and collapse the entire investigation into Eskom. Let's just pause and think about the sheer audacity of that. The Minister of State Security, the man in charge of the country's spies and intelligence services, is accused of trying to bribe the lead investigator of a parliamentary probe into state capture. It's like the fire chief trying to pay off the detective who is investigating him for arson. It's a direct assault on the separation of powers and the integrity of Parliament itself. Although he was later acquitted on this specific charge, the accusation itself sent shockwaves through the political system and cemented his reputation. His appointment to the state security portfolio in the first place was highly controversial, coming at a time when he himself was under investigation for corruption relating to land deals back in his home province of Mpumalanga. It felt like putting the fox in charge of the hen house and then being surprised when feathers start to fly. Bongo's role didn't end there. After being removed as minister, he was later appointed as the chairperson of a parliamentary portfolio committee, a position from which he continued to court controversy. His story is a powerful illustration of the ANC's factional battles and the concept of recycling tainted politicians back into positions of power. Bongani Bongo represents a particularly brazen form of political corruption, the alleged willingness to actively sabotage the very institutions of democracy to protect the powerful and hide the truth. And that brings us to our number 1 spot. This one is particularly painful because it happened right in the middle of a national crisis, a time when we were all supposed to be pulling together. At the top of our list is Dr. Zweli Mkhize and the digital vibes scandal. As Minister of Health during the COVID-19 pandemic, Mkhize was, for a time, one of the most trusted figures in the country. He was the calm, doctorly voice guiding us through the storm, which is what makes his fall from grace so devastating. The scandal revolves around a 150 million rand communications contract awarded by the Department of Health to a company called Digital Vibes. On the surface, it was for COVID-19 communication campaigns, but investigators from the Special Investigating Unit, or SIU, uncovered that Digital Vibes was, in fact, controlled by Mkhize's close associates, his former personal spokesperson and personal assistant. The company was a front, and the contract was allegedly a vehicle for looting. The SIU report was damning. It found that the contract was awarded irregularly and was fraudulent. But the most shocking part was where the money went. It wasn't just about inflated invoices. The SIU found that millions of rand from Digital Vibes flowed directly to Mkhize's son, and were used to pay for things like a new car and home improvements for the minister's family property. Money that was meant to inform the public about a deadly pandemic was allegedly used for personal enrichment. The betrayal of public trust was immense. At a time when South Africans were losing their jobs, their loved ones, and living in fear, the man leading the health response was at the center of a massive corruption scandal. He was the captain of the ship, who was allegedly caught stealing the life rafts. He initially denied any involvement, but as the evidence mounted, his position became untenable, and he was forced to resign. The Digital Vibes scandal is #1 on our list because of its sheer cynicism. It represents a new low. To allegedly steal money meant to save lives during a global pandemic is a moral failure of catastrophic proportions. It eroded the public's trust, not just in the government's COVID response, but in the very idea of public service. Dr. Zweli Mkhize's story is the ultimate cautionary tale of how even our most trusted leaders can fall, and how greed can triumph over duty, even in our darkest hour. And there you have it. 10 stories. 10 individuals entrusted with immense power who stand accused of betraying that trust in the most profound ways. From the grand architect of state capture to the man who allegedly looted pandemic funds, this is the face of corruption in South Africa. It's infuriating, it's disheartening, and it's easy to feel hopeless in the face of it all. The scale is vast, the details are ugly, and the damage to our country's economy and its soul is immeasurable. These aren't just political scandals, they are deep wounds on the body of our nation. But despair is a luxury we cannot afford. Apathy is the soil in which corruption grows, and silence is the water that helps it flourish. The purpose of looking directly at this darkness is not to be consumed by it, but to understand it, to know the names, to understand the schemes, and to recognize the patterns. Because only when we see the problem clearly can we begin to formulate a solution. Accountability is not a given, it is demanded. Change doesn't happen by magic, it is fought for, inch by painstaking inch, by ordinary citizens who refuse to look away. This list is not the end of the story. It's a chapter in an ongoing struggle for the future of South Africa. The Zondo Commission, the work of investigative journalists, and the actions of whistleblowers have dragged these truths into the light. Now, the responsibility falls to all of us. Corruption may run deep, but exposing the truth is the first step to change. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and demand accountability.